A personal question?
Yeah, Norman, I've just got a question from last week. Is that okay?
Yeah, fire away.
Yeah, the Rashi says something. If they prolong the month, and it's not to the next day, it says shelo bismano. He uses the phrase. I can't remember exactly the quotation. He said then they have to make it shelo bismano, but it's not shelo bismano if they have to.
No, you're quite right. It's that word's inverted commas. Bismano normally means on the 30th day. In other words, a 29-day month means that you're normally Makadish Bismano. But of course, whenever the Zman is the Zman. You're quite right.
Yeah, I mean, it's not always. I mean, sometimes,
That's the wording normally used when you see Bismano. We'll cap more of that, actually, on the next page today.
So what are you saying? Normally refers to when it's on the 30th, is Bismano. Okay.
You're absolutely right. They're both Bisman and Shelo Bisman, if you see what I mean. But it's just, the way the wording we use. Bismano normally means in its earlier time. Perhaps you can put the word earlier in brackets, if that helps.
Yeah, okay, I'm just saying. So, I mean, either is the time. It depends.
Yes, it is. Yes, indeed. Yeah. It's just a way of expressing that. Right, on we go. Chof Beis Omid Aleph. Now, this is a Mishnah towards the end, just before the end of the parak, but there's a lot in this Mishnah. In fact, there are two Mishnahs here, where it says, Elohein Apsulim. People may remember this. Mervyn, you probably do remember Gemara Sanhedrin. It comes up as well in Sanhedrin and other places too. Always an interesting Mishnah, as we'll see. Last week we spoke about whether you can or cannot have members of the family acting as Eidim, coming to say they saw the moon. The conclusion was, although there was a machlokas in the Mishnah, if you remember, we had Rabbi Yosef, we had Rabbi Shimon, and the conclusion seems to be, with Paskin like that no, you can't have family members. We do need people, the Rosh Bezdin, to actually announce it, but what we're talking about is you cannot have family members acting as Eidim. And now we have further group of people that cannot act as Eidim coming to testify about the moon. And this is as I say, the Mishnah that comes up in Sanhedrin as well. And it's quite very important, in fact. The following people cannot act as Eidim. They are possible for Eidim. Now, that's very important, particularly, say, you've got weddings. The Eidim that, in fact, it's well known if you go to Yeshiva's Brisk. Hello there, Laurie. If you go to certain places, it's the Eidim who a lot of people think the person who gets the last bracha of Sheva brachos, that's the ultimate honor at a wedding. In Brisk, it's the two witnesses, because if they've been selected to be witnesses, and actually everything depends on them, we want to make sure the witnesses are okay, and actually, as we've seen here, not possul la'edus. And we'll see various things which mean the Eidim might be possul la'edus. Let's have a look at this. The Mishnah towards the end, just over halfway down the page, Chof Beis Omid Aleph. Elohein Apsulim. The following people are actually possul and cannot act as Eidim. And who are they? Hamasachek Bekuvya. People familiar with this? Las Vegas. Masachek Bekuvya. Have a look at Rashi. I'm sorry?
I said, I'm pigeon fanciers as well. Anyway.
Oh, we'll get to them. Yeah, yes. And of course, the big machlokas about what pshat is here. Let's have a look at Rashi first. What's this kuvya? Have you got it just after the Mishnah? About 12 narrow lines down. Chatichoy shel etzem. Instead of using a dice, they used, it seems, chatichas, like parts of the bone of an animal, which were broken, and they would play. And obviously, how they did it, I can't tell you. I'm not actually familiar with that game, but equivalent to something like a dice. They would play. Be'erovah normally means you're putting up a pledge. In other words, people will put money in the center. It looks like the center of the pot, and with these bones. Instead of using a dice, they were using bones. And obviously the winner about the bones. And the Rabbanon said, Asmachta lo kanya. What does it mean, Asmachta lo kanya? Asmachta means you're relying on winning. That's the point. You're putting the money in the kitty. And you don't really, I mean, why are you doing this? You're doing this because you expect good chance you're going to win, and that's really why you're putting the money there. You're not really giving, it's not a matana. It's not a gift you're giving to the other individual. You hope to reap the benefits and actually not hand this over. And the Gemara says, Asmachta lo kanya. Even if you do receive and take the winnings from the other member who's playing this game, could be more than one, we're saying that's not a proper kinyan. You haven't really acquired this in the full koine like you would do a present or a purchase. The rabbis called this gezela midrabona. Now it's not, as we'll say, look, continue the Gemara, Rashi. Vaharin Gazlonon midrabonon. You got that word? The midorais, as far as the Torah is concerned, how would you describe a thief? I mean, don't forget it's in broad daylight here, so it's not Geneva where you're coming in the middle of the night and nobody's seeing you. This is in broad daylight. You're taking this person's money or whatever is put in the center pot, but you don't expect to hand over the money. Each member doesn't. That's why he's doing this. It's a game. They're hoping to win. Says the Gemara, midoraisa, as far as the Torah is concerned, Einu Korah Gazlan. You can't call him, have you got it beginning on his Gazlan? You can't call him a robber. Elo ha'chayef miyad ish, someone who snatches from someone else with a gun, without a gun. He's snatching, that's called broad daylight, a robber. And where do we know that word? Of course, we've had the word gazela mentioned in the Torah. We're not talking about here geneva. Geneva is normally done with people don't know you're there in hiding. This is broad daylight, taking away someone's money. Now, the real word gazela, the way we see the definition of this, interesting, we go to a pasuk in Shmuel, and we do this sometimes. We find a pasuk in Tanakh, which explains the word to us. This pasuk comes from Shmuel Beis Chof Gimel. Now, you should have a superscript, which will take you to the pasuk. I've got one in mind, and it comes from the pasuk in Shmuel. Vayigzol es hachanis miyad ha-mitzri. And what happened? Vayargehu b'chanis, so he snatched away the spear from the miyad ha-mitzri, from the Egyptian. So the word gazela means snatching away from someone. That's called gazela. What happens here when people put their money in the middle and you take their money? This isn't really snatching away their money, but the Chachomim actually classified this as gazela midrabbonon. The person didn't really want to give it to you. He only put the money in the middle because he's hoping to get the benefit and then get the money himself, get his money back. He doesn't really want to hand it over to you. So the Chachomim classified that as gazela midrabbonon. Okay, let's have a look at another example. So someone who's playing, I suppose gambling is what we call this, would be posel la'edus, because the money he's taking is not really, that the other individual doesn't really want to hand this over. Okay? We'll have a look more about this in a moment. Let's just follow through. Malve beribis is the next one. Someone who's lending money on interest. Of course, that's an avera. cannot lend money on interest. But what about the money you receive from the individual? A person lends money on interest. The money they receive, the interest, how would you classify the money received, the interest received? Says Rashi, again, lav gazlon de oraisa. You can't actually midoraisa, beginning of the line is midoraisa, lemifsale, to make impossible, mishum, because al toshes eid homos. Remember, don't be, we're talking there about a witness full of violence. What that means is, dohomi nafshe yohevle, someone who is a gazlan, al toshes eid homos, as we find this posuk in Chof Gimel, in Shemos. That is talking again about someone who snatches money away. Such an individual, min haTorah, cannot be a witness. But in this case, when the person charged interest, the person who received the loan is actually quite pleased to receive the loan altogether. It's osa, it's forbidden. Continues Rashi, he's giving it in his own free will. Therefore, this is not classified as a robber min haTorah, but nevertheless, if a person does this, they are disqualified from acting as an aid. Okay? And the last category in this group is mafriche yonim. There'll be more coming. Mafriche yonim. Mafriche perach, lafriach, causing the doves to fly. Says the Gemara, says Rashi, hainu nami ke'en kuvya. It's a similar type of gambling. It sounds like, according to Rashi, we're talking about each one. So each one has their own dove.
So we're going to get back to pigeons when he comes on.
Yes, we were talking about pigeons. So in other words, we're talking about racing pigeons, one against the other. Again, you're doing this, particularly you're picking up money, because you're expecting not to hand over money. And similarly, the person against whom you're racing, so it's to say it's pigeon racing. So therefore, it's not considered snatching like a robber, but nevertheless, midrabanon, as Rashi goes on to say, in tekadme yonoch liyoni, if your dove will beat my dove, in this race, the person doesn't really expect to hand over, otherwise he wouldn't go into this competition. But he's doing it because he expects to win, and therefore doesn't really want to hand that money over at all, right? And therefore, that is considered midrabanon, it's considered theft, and therefore such an individual would not be permitted as an aid, as a witness here, or as the Mishnah mentions in Sanhedrin, other cases too. Okay? So these are all things out of the ordinary. And that's what Rashi mentioned here. If the person was a real robber, convicted robber, there's no question at all. We've got a posuk, al toshes aid homos. Al toshes aid. You couldn't have an aid homos, violent, doesn't, whether it's violent or not, but someone who is an out and out criminal could not act as a witness. This is an additional category we've got here. People who are also not permitted to act as an aid because they have taken money midrabanon. It's forbidden, the money they have taken. Okay? Let's stop there for a minute on those categories.
So, can I just ask? This is identical to the Mishnah in Sanhedrin, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Is it a contempt?
Yeah, absolutely. Here we're saying I might have thought in this case After all, there wasn't a view in the previous Mishnah that family members were permitted. So maybe the Midrabbanon might have been relaxed. Says this Mishnah, no, it isn't. Now, it's very interesting, this point about the gamblers. Can I ask you, Peter, to bring up Sefaria Sanhedrin? This is where the other Mishnah appears, Chof Dalad, Omid base, so 24b, Sanhedrin. Yes, that's better. 24b, let's drop down to the lowest part of this Gemara, and you'll see the Mishnah there. Oh, there we go. Stop. We'll come down a bit further. Yeah. Carry on, and the Sokre Shviz keep going down. Here we are. Now, this is interesting. What is the reason why this person playing with dice, or remember the way we explained it according to Rashi, it was some type of bones they were using, but again, using it as a dice. Says the Gemara, Masachi B'Kubya Maika Ovid. Now, stop for a second. If we're telling me gamblers are out playing with dice, you cannot act as an aid. Does that mean if you just have the odd gamble, or more than that? Now, look at this Gemara, very interesting Gemara here. What has the person done wrong? He is not, with a revolver asked for his money. What is wrong? Says the Gemara, Omar Romi Bar Choma Mishum Dahave Asmachta. That's what we've seen in Rashi. But Asmachta Lo Kanya. You can see the translation here. It's inconclusive consent, he calls it. Asmachta, being soimech. Doesn't have real consent. When he loses, he doesn't really want to hand the money over. Person's purchasing. You're right, even in a purchase, you don't want to hand the money, but you appreciate, I'm handing the money over and I'm getting something in instead. But here you don't expect to win. As he mentioned here in the translation, since he plays on the assumption he will, otherwise he wouldn't do it. And an asmachta does not really affect acquisition, and therefore he is considered a robber only in the sense midrabbanon. That is the view of Romi Bar Choma. Now look at the next view. Rab Sheshes Omar, no. Kol ki high governor, love asmachtahi. No, that's fine. We're not worried about that. The person, it's true, the person going into this competition and the gambling expects to win. He wouldn't put the money down unless he thought there was a good chances he was going to win, and therefore that's fine. It's not the theft point. It's not that he's considered a robber midrabbanon, ela lefi she'ein asukin b'yeshuvah shel olam. He's not doing something which is for the good, something productive, as he translated here. It's not an occupation. It's not an occupation, and we know the occupation's hard work. And look at the translation here. Since they do not realize the effort required, because they're just spending their time gambling, they don't realize the difficulties of actually earning a living. That's the point is, nicely translated here, they may not be scrupulous about other people's money, and their testimony cannot be relied upon. This is in Sanhedrin, and the same rule would apply here too. So it's nothing to do with the robber point. It's once a person spends his time gambling rather than working hard, a good day's work, etc. Therefore, we feel they may not be so careful, scrupulous about other people's money. They can't really be trusted. That's the point. Says that's very nice. We've seen there for two reasons. Romi Bar Choma, who says it's considered a category of theft. Rav Shesha said it's not real theft, but these people are not really worried and concerned about other people's money. They're spending their time. They're not involved in yeshuva shel olam, occupations, productive work. They're not doing something of, let's say, productive. Says the Gemara, next line. My binayu, what's the difference between these two? Ika binayu de goma unusa achrita. What's the difference between the two? So the difference is where they have another occupation. They are doing this as a sideline, a bit of fun. Yes, if he has another occupation, if someone has another occupation, clearly he knows what it means to have, I say, work hard. He's got another occupation. He's doing something productive. And therefore, if he's also gambling, the money that comes from the gamble, that's fine. Remember, according to Rav Sheshes, it's not considered theft. This person has another occupation, and therefore such an individual could be a witness. However, according to Rami Bar Choma, he is considered having taken the other person's money and considered, like, as I say, as a robber midrabanon, as the money he gains from gambling is not legally his, he's disqualified. Whether or not he has another occupation. Are you with me? So therefore, according to Rami Bar Choma, this person, if they're gambling, they're a thief. Midrabanon, and therefore a thief midrabanon is out. According to Rav Sheshes, the point was he's never earned, a day's hard work. He's never seen such a thing. And therefore, an individual like that may not be scrupulous about other things too. And therefore, that's why he's not allowed to act as a witness. Or in our case, with Eidus HaChodesh. So there's quite a difference here, you see. Someone who has the odd flutter, according to Rav Sheshes, that's fine. Because it's not theft. He's got another occupation. He would be permitted to act as a witness. According to Rami Bar Choma, no, he couldn't. Because he has taken other money and it's legally not his. Now, you'll be pleased to know the halacha in Shulchan Aruch is like Rav Sheshes. I know Rashi here is explaining according to Rami Bar Choma, but the halacha is actually right Rav Sheshes, which means if you have another occupation and the odd flutter and the odd gamble, not saying I'm necessarily advising it, but nevertheless, an individual who would be gambling but has an occupation as well, as we paskin like Rav Sheshes, such an individual could actually be a witness. Okay, so you'll be pleased to know that. So any of those individuals with the gambling as well, as long as they have another job. If they have another job, they can still act as a witness. So you can see we paskin like Rav Sheshes, not the way Rashi is explaining here on the Mishnah. Clearly, Rashi is explaining according to Rami Bar Choma, but the halacha is not like that. Okay, back please to our own Gemara.
Norman, I thought that,
we got a lot of hands up here. A lot of the old Las Vegas.
I was under the impression, Norman, that there was a halachic prohibition against, in quotes, serious gambling anyway.
Yes.
That halachically it's forbidden over and above whether one can be a witness.
What do you say? Is that a question or a
statement? Is there? I was under the impression there is a halachic prohibition against gambling in any serious way. An occasional flutter, as you say, okay. But if you go beyond that and rely on chance or you engage in that, because you're just relying on haphazard circumstances and chance, I thought halachically, therefore, it was not it was forbidden to do serious gambling.
That's a good point. You can see, if we're passing like Rav Sheshes, it means that if you're taking someone else's money under those circumstances, it would not be considered theft. But the concern is you're not doing something productive. That's the concern. If you've got another occupation, now it means you're actually earning money, good money from the other occupation, and you've got the odd flutter, that's one thing. But you're quite right. If you're spending, serious gambling, then again, it would come under this category, and somebody would have to make a decision whether someone like that, it's not actually in a proper occupation. That's not an occupation relying on chance rather than, it's true, what everyone's doing in business, you could say is all in chance, but and even in the professions too, you've got to make sure, the payments are coming in and everything's going well. But nevertheless, you're quite right. Someone who's earning the main bulk of their money actually comes from, as I say, serious gambling. That would be a concern. You're quite right. You're quite right. And again, it's not something we want to try and encourage the children to get involved in. As we know, you've got the serious gamblers addicted to gambling, etc. And besides the fact, yes, absolutely. The first point will be you wouldn't be act as a witness because you're not doing something productive. And yes, of course, the Chachomim would be against that. Yes.
But Laurie's point, if I understand it, is that it's even leaving aside testimony in Eidos, it's de facto gambling is what's the word? It's cautioned against or warned against, or it's hostile. I think that's how I understand it. Even there wasn't an issue where there can be witnesses or not witnesses. There's a question of whether gambling per se.
Yes, and I think what we're saying is, yes, it would be forbidden. But what we're saying here is, what about someone who has, say, the odd flutter? Would they be allowed to act as a witness? According to Rami Bachoma, even the odd gambling, not the serious gambler. Yeah. I've unmuted. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you're quite right, Mervyn. What we're saying here is even a small amount of gambling, whether that would be sufficient, yeah, and maybe the Chachomim wouldn't be against that, but we are saying here, yes, if you hold that it's actual theft, then they'd be against any sort of gambling at all. And you'd be banned from acting as a witness. That's what we're saying here. If we'd follow Rami Bachoma, according to Rav Sheshes, no, you shouldn't. You're quite right. If the flutter will lead to serious gambling, of course that's out. But what we're saying is even on the couple of flutters, as I say, that would be, according to our the Gemara Rav Sheshes, you'd still be allowed to act as a witness because that type of asmachta, the money has been handed over by the other individual. It doesn't qualify as theft. And what you can't have is someone who has, let's say, a theft midrabbonon would be banned from acting as a witness. Charles has got a point here.
What about somebody who has retired and he is living on the income from his pension or his investments? He doesn't have a serious occupation. Likewise, what about somebody who makes an investment on the stock exchange, either regularly or from time to time? Is that a flutter? Is that a gamble?
No, we're talking about you're talking about investing in whatever. And then you're reaping the benefit, let's say, whether it's property or shares or anything else. We're not talking here in that situation. We're talking about taking money from another person. So it's gambling. What we're talking about is, one against the other. we're not talking about investing in something which we're hoping will rise in value. We're not talking about that. We're talking about where there are two parties involved. Is that considered theft or not? Separate point. And the other point you mentioned about someone who at least has another occupation or maybe had another occupation would appreciate what it means, hard work. And therefore, we would hope that such an individual would be scrupulous. Even if, today he's not actually working anymore, he's retired, but nevertheless knows what it means to have a hard day in the office. And therefore, such an individual would be careful with other people's money as well. We hope, and then have a chazakah, that would be the, as I say, the default position would be that a person would be concerned about other people's property, and therefore they could act as a witness. In a word, they're trustworthy. Is such a person trustworthy? And we're saying, yes, they are trustworthy. They know what it means to earn money, and therefore they will be trustworthy. That's the bottom line. Where if somebody who's, relying on chance, and that's where they're earning their money, money going around, such a person, the Chachamim have said, is not to be trusted. David?
A lot of people these days who do a hard day's work, but the Rabbonim, I think, wouldn't regard it as a proper occupation. I mean, if you're in a hedge fund, if you're trading in cryptocurrency, I mean, lots of people, whether you call that gambling, I mean, there's an element of gambling, there's an element of skill in it. But there are an awful lot of people these days who are not making their living as doctors or lawyers or, doing what would have been regarded as a job, and are actually just playing around with money, and that's how they're making a living.
I don't know whether the hedge fund managers would say they're gamblers. I'm not sure they'd classify. It's very clear here. What we're saying here is it's very much one person against another taking that money. That's what we've seen from Rashi. I'm talking about skill involved here. It's the concern for other people's money. That's the point.
Well, I suppose these days a lot of these things are much more impersonal. It's not you're taking money from one particular person, but there are all sorts of different interchanges in markets. But ultimately, you're hoping to gain, and that's going to mean somebody else is losing.
Does it mean necessarily somebody else is losing from it? Not necessarily. I mean, eventually, of course, if you imagine, you're into certain various assets that you're investing in, you're hoping the value will rise, and you're doing that with a certain amount of skill. You're a property manager and investor in whatever. There's skill involved, and therefore that's what you're assuming and hoping the value will go up.
Yeah, but there's skill involved in poker, apparently. I'm sure there is skill in poker, but that doesn't mean it's not gambling.
Yeah, that may be, but the bottom line is you're still taking someone else's money. There's a very big difference between deciding, on currencies, you think the currency is going to go up, etc., whatever. The skill involved in that, whereas if it's one against another, and it's really, the chips are in the middle type of thing, you're reaping the benefits of other people's money, that is rather different. And that's very much what we're talking about here. But there is this point, if a person's got to know what it means, what money means, not growing on trees type of thing. And therefore, we want the person to not, you talk about scrupulous, concerned about other, otherwise, is he trusted? That's the bottom line. Can the person be trusted? And are you all right? Yeah.
So you said two things. I'm not sure if you really want to focus on can he be trusted, because you've also said it's how much he's concerned about other people's. His concern for other people. It seems to me this is very much about it's bein adam lechavera, how much he concerned for other individuals. It's not just a test of honesty; it's a specific test of how whether he takes other people's money, whether he tricks them or does something which is unfair on other people. It's not just a pure test of honesty. It seems to be very much depending on his relationship with the other partners, the business partners, or whoever the other people playing the game.
No, you're absolutely I agree with you. But one of the tests we're saying is if he's happy to gamble and take other people's money and not really earn, earn a living.
But we're not testing whether he's told lies in the past about somebody else, whether he's been dishonest. We're specifically testing how he relates to other people.
Yes, but I think what we're saying here, this is a bit like a bit of a test. This shows the type of concern as you say, the concern he will have about other people.
We're not necessarily testing his honesty or his go. Yeah, we're not testing his, and it's surprising because I would have thought that we just test how accurate he is in what he says, how truthful, how accurate. Because we're talking about Eidim now, not just for money matters, we're talking about Eidim for the moon and other things. And yet we're focusing on his financial dealings with other people, whether he lives off the public purse because he doesn't earn money, or whether he takes money from gamblers, or whether he works for his own money. It seems to be very financial, and particularly...
That's a good point. And I think that may well be the difference between that you talk about why the Mishnah is written in two places. We've got the Mishnah in Sanhedrin, which is very much focused on financial, talk about Eidim in Gemara Sanhedrin. And they're very much, it's more this point, not so much to trust, as you say, it's the concern for other people. And it's easy come, easy go. I think he owes him money. I think he did. It did happen. It didn't happen. Can he really be trusted? Sorry, I shouldn't have said the word trusted. It's more the concern, as you say, the concern for other people. When we shift and we've got this Mishnah here, that's very much what this Mishnah is telling us. That the idea about concern for other people, there's a knock-on effect as well in general trust about that individual. That's the point. And we're moving across from financial matters, Choshen Mishpat, and in fact, that's where this Mishnah and the Shulchan Aruch is in Choshen Mishpat. We're bringing it across to something totally different when we're talking about the Eidim for Kiddush HaChodesh. And what we're really saying here is it's moving across from being concerned about other people, being generally trustworthy. And that's really what we're saying. So it's a good point. I think you're right. It depends where you're looking at this Mishnah. And we're saying very much that we're putting both these things together. The Chachomim, just like they said over there, the concern about other people, you're not too worried. Similarly, we're saying the same rule applies here. And it's a fascinating point because here, Rashi is not mentioning the other view at all. He's very much focused on trust rather than concern for other people. Interesting, and that's the view he's bringing here. Although, as I say, in the Shulchan Aruch, it's very much focused on the view of Rav Sheshes. Rashi's not mentioning that at all. And you could say, because maybe in a situation like this, it's not that the point about concern for other people. We need to be focusing on as well trustworthiness, and that's where we're talking on this mission. So both things are applicable. Yeah. They do come in, as I say, both things. And Rashi very much telling us here that if there's an avera of theft, midrabanan, then the person is disqualified.
That's again, Rashi's focusing on the bein adam lechavera. He doesn't say if you do any averas, you're out. He says there's one avera we're interested in, and that's stealing from other people, or even
you're right. Yeah, but what we've said before is this Mishnah is telling us clearly, if the person is a criminal in any other way, they will be barred from acting as a witness. Here, this person is a criminal It's midrabbanon. That's the point. The Torah would actually allow these individuals to act as witnesses. The Chachomim have extended it and said, no, we don't want witnesses, even if in this case it's a gamble, and the person in the end of the day, there's no revolver there. The other fellow decided he also wants to go in for this gamble. So it's not quite the same. Nevertheless, the Chachamim have extended it. But you're right. Here we're not focusing on criminals in any other way. They would be barred. If they're psulim, criminals are out to act as aiding. Here we're extending it even to the category of midrabanan. Okay? And then the Mishnah goes on and mentions another category, soicharei shavius, those people who are dealing in shavius. What do you mean? They're actually selling, buying, selling. They've got a business in shavius. It's not property, it's the growth in shavius this year, of course, being Shemitah. Have a look at Rashi here. Soicharei shavius. Oisin Sechoira b'peiros shavius. Now this is interesting. The Rachmana Oma la'ochla v'lo l'schoira. The Pasuk says in Bahar, when it talks about Shemitah, the Pasuk tells us that the year, everything's fallow, and it's quite amazing, certainly around here, where you see everything just growing, quite amazing, all the fields, etc. La'ochla v'lo l'schoira. You can certainly enjoy the fruits of Shemitah. We're not quite, it's early, it's too early for wine from Shemitah, or actually fruit from Shemitah. I mean, halfway down the page where it says soicharei shavius. Yeah, beginning of the line is soicharei shavius. Halfway down the page. Oisin schoira peiros shavius, beginning of the line. Derachmona oma v'lochla v'lo l'schoira. This is again. Ulefishe nechshedu kol elu lavar al das. This is back to Benji's point. They are transgressing machmas momai because of money. Choshtum. Therefore, the rabbis also suspected Leos mi'idim sheker al momon v'shoichad. We're now moving a different point, you see. Back to Benji's point. There may be a financial reason in what they're saying. They may be bribed. Remember, we've said this before, there were certain individuals that are trying to change the calendar. They certainly didn't want, maybe on a certain day, holidays and whatever it was, Yom Tovim falling on certain days. These people can be bribed easily. That's what we're saying. Those people who are not concerned about other people's money, that's the point that Rashi is making here. They may have been bribed. We never can tell. So that's why the Chachomim here have disqualified them from acting as witnesses. So once you see, even if it's a midrabbanan, a theft midrabbanan means they can easily be swayed, and there may be a possibility of a bribe, money, there may be financial reason why they want to actually say what they're saying. And therefore, that's the point, they won't be trusted. And this is a continued, as I say, on from the previous statements we've made. Says the Mishnah, va'avodim, similarly servants. Now this is interesting. Says Rashi, Pesule midaraisa, they're actually posel min haTorah. And this is coming back to the point about the ladies. The Gemara learns that out from an Isha, just like ladies are not allowed to be Eidim. There's a posuk. It's not that we don't trust the ladies. In many instances, the ladies are probably more trustworthy than the men. That's fine. That can go on record too. But that's not the point. There's a posuk which says they can't act as Eidim, Omdu Noshim. What we're saying, ladies, And there's a kavachayma, how much more so avodim who actually have not quite completed this whole geirus process. Remember, these are Eved Kanani. They're now acting as an Eved. I say they're avodim. They were non-Jews. They're avodim. They haven't. They're who they can marry. It's limited, and therefore they're not. Can't be. Here we're talking about an Eved Kanani. An Eved Kanani would actually be forbidden to act as a witness for Eidus HaChodesh. Okay? Continue the Gemara. Now the Gemara said here, sorry, I haven't finished the Mishnah yet, have I? Another line in the Mishnah. Zeh HaKlal. The general rule. Kol Eidus, any testimony, she'ein ha'isha k'sheira lo. If ladies are not allowed to give testimony, av hein ein k'sheira lo. This group mentioned here, which is only midrabanon. Remember, they're not thieves, min haTorah. The money's been handed over, even in the gambling situation. Remember the dice situation, the money, it's not out and out robbery. So there's only midrabanon. What we're saying here, where when ladies can give testimony, so can these individuals in this Mishnah. Look at the Gemara, please. That's a point I've just made. The inference from this Mishnah is if ladies are permitted, now normally they can't, but whenever ladies are permitted to give testimony, similarly, the category in all this group in this Mishnah, they will also be permitted. Omar Rav Ashi, Zois Omeres, tells us that a gazlan midivreim, a robber midrabona, that's what's midivreim, from the words of the rabbis, kosher, ha'isha keshera, if the lady is permitted to give testimony, kagoim. A couple of examples. Lohoid al misas odom, lahasi es ishtoi. Wow. Enabling someone, a lady, to remarry because the husband had passed away. Now, normally, of course, we talk about testimony, you'd need Adim, full Adim, and this group would be banned, but not in that situation. A lady can give. Now, what's special about the testimony of someone passing away? Similarly, a Soita, remember, she was warned not to be alone with this individual. And if there's a lady actually saw shenitmes, actually a relationship took place, shalotishta, she doesn't drink the mea ma'orim. Remember, the water of the Soita is where it's unclear what actually took place. She was warned, don't be alone with this individual, and she was alone. We're not actually sure what happened. Then she drinks. Remember the mea ma'orim, the water of the Soita. If there's someone who says, we know for sure that actually there was a relationship here as well, then she does not drink the water. Then even ladies are permitted to come forward and give that testimony to allow. So let's focus on the first example. If someone passes away, then a lady is permitted to say, I know that this individual passed away, so that the wife can remarry. And the reason for that, the Chachomim said, is because the wife herself will be super careful before she actually remarries, because she knows if in fact the person did not pass away, then she will be forbidden not only to her husband, but also to this individual. So she's going to be super careful. So although you do need some testimony, but the testimony of a lady will be permitted. And that's in part because of the we try to be lenient with an aguna. Remember, aguna, someone who doesn't have the husband. We're not sure what actually happened to the husband. You need some testimony, but it's the testimony of a lady will be permitted. The Chachomim permit that. So what we're saying here is, when ladies are permitted to give testimony, similarly, we will allow this group mentioned in this Mishnah to give testimony. Particularly, let's focus on the case about the lady whose husband passed away, because we think, and there's a strong reason to assume that the lady herself will be super careful. We need some testimony, but limited testimony, because she will be super careful. Otherwise, if the husband reappears, she will be forbidden both to the husband and to the new husband, the old and new husband. So she's going to be very careful about that too. And therefore, that coupled with the weaker testimony that you need means that the group in this Mishnah will be permitted.
Well, what do you mean by weaker testimony? I don't know. What do you mean by weaker testimony?
No, as we saw in Sanhedrin, and here, we do not allow people to act testimony, even though the Torah would allow them. The Torah, let's go with Rashi at the moment, and we'll say that this asmachta, lo kanya, even though it's not gezela, it's theft, but it shouldn't bar the individual from acting as a witness. The Chachomim nevertheless said, no, we don't want these individuals because they've taken money unlawfully, midrabanan, unlawfully. Yeah, it's not gezela. Therefore, we don't want them midrabanan to act as a witness, but we will allow them to act as.
But you will allow them to act as what? Sorry, cut out. You will allow them to act as what?
We will allow them to act, to give testimony where a lady is permitted to give testimony. For example, where the husband died and nobody knows whether he died. One of these individuals, Mesachik Mekuvya, normally not permitted to act as a witness, could act as a witness to say, we know the husband died.
And why is there this leniency? Is that because of Darkei Shalom, or what's the reason?
No, because of the Aguna. We're trying to be as lenient as we can with an Aguna, but also on top of that, we know that the lady herself, the widow, the possible widow, will look into it with great care, because otherwise, if she gets this wrong, she will be barred both from the old and the new husband. So coupling those two things together, we therefore allow this group mentioned in this Mishnah to act as witnesses. Okay?
It's somewhat insulting to the status of women's testimony, isn't it, really, that we say that these laggards, that they can give testimony in the same
no. There's a pasuk which doesn't normally allow, and you can work out what the reasons might be. The Torah doesn't give the reason. The Torah says ladies cannot, and I think Charles was talking about this before, they may be under pressure from outside, whatever reasons you like, but the Torah actually says, the Torah doesn't give a reason. The Torah says ladies are not permitted to act as witnesses. We do, however, permit them to act, not because they're considered like criminals, chas v'sholem. The Torah does not allow, and I say you can come up with your own svaras and reasons behind that, why you think that might be true. Maybe she would be more likely to be under pressure from other individuals. Rather, we're not, I say there's no way we're focusing at her truthfulness, but she may be under other pressure, weaker, we don't know. But the Torah does not allow her to be an aid. Very different to the category of criminals. The Torah doesn't allow criminals to act as witnesses for totally different reasons, okay? But I say the Torah doesn't give the reason for ladies. What we're saying, however, though, ladies are permitted in an aguna situation to allow a possible widow to remarry. Ladies will be permitted, as I say, that coupled with the fact that the widow herself will look into it very carefully, means that ladies will be permitted. But it's very important that it's not the same category. We're not putting this lady together with these criminals. It's a totally different so the Torah says ladies cannot act as witnesses. Okay. Have we got a minute just to finish off the Mishnah, next Mishnah? Thumbs up. Somebody's looking for a l'chaim. So let's go with it. Next Mishnah. Interesting, this is a Mishnah with no Gemara. Doesn't often happen in Gemaras. Where there is Gemara, there normally is. I say in Masechtas where there's Gemara, you normally find a Gemara on every Mishnah. But here's one. Mi sheroes hachodesh. Someone sees the moon. He can't walk. So what do? We're particularly talking about Shabbos. Molichin oisa al hachamor. We allow him to go. This will be an achamor nowadays and a car. And don't forget molichin oisa. We would bring him really, moilech. Other individuals would be allowed to accompany and take this individual, ala chamor. So they're loading up the chamor. Afilu b'mitah. Even on a bed, you'd be carrying out the individual on a bed. Okay. Yeah, Rashi says here, markibin. So we have molichin oisai, but we've got the same markibin oisai from the word roichev, to ride. He'd be allowed to ride, or you'd carry him. And Rashi says even on Shabbos. What about in Tzudolahem? What do you mean Tzud? Remember Tzod? Like lying in ambush, lying in wait. Look, says Rashi, Im yesh orvim baderech. If you suspect there will be people lying in ambush, kamo a posuk, v'ato tsudo es nafshi. This is David HaMelech talking to Shaul when he says, you are lying in ambush about nafshi lakachta, to take it. So there will be, and Rashi goes on to mention, do you remember the Baisusim and the Kusim? There are certain individuals who were quite keen to try and upset the Bezdin and make sure they got the wrong day. They might have their own intentions. Some of them, remember, wanted Yom Tov to fall on certain days. They might be there to try and prevent the witnesses getting to the Beis Hamikdash, getting to the Sanhedrin, to try and fool the rabbis. So there might be people there lying in ambush. So then, back to our Mishnah. Have you got it? Beginning line is B'mitah. I'll feel B'mitah in Tzudolahem, in Tzudolahem. If they're lying in wait, or you suspect, loikhin b'yoda maklois, or anything else, you can take with you sticks as well, or any implements you need against these people who are ambushing. I'm not sure that sticks might nowadays be that helpful, but any other implements you could take with you. And this is even on a Shabbos. If in fact it was some far way off, you could take food. Imagine you saw the moon on a Friday night, so you might need a full night and a day to get to the Bezdin. You've got to get there by the end of Shabbos. So on a day and a night, traveling a night and the full day, machalelin es Shabbos. That will be the maximum. It's got to be enough time to be able to get there before the end of Shabbos, so that the Bezdin will then say, today is Rosh Chodesh. And you can go out for Eidus HaChodesh. Do you remember? Shenema, the Pasuk says, we've seen this Pasuk before, came up Chof Eile Moyadei Hashem. These are the Yomim Tovim Hashem. And the Pasuk continues, Mikro Kodesh. holy calling. Asher tikru oisam b'mayadon. If you can, try and call them in the right time. Now, we did learn, if you remember, the Beis Din, of course, has the capacity to overlook the Eidim, but it's preferable, if you can, to announce the day based on the testimony of the Eidim on the correct time. Asher tikru oisam b'mayadon. And therefore, from that pasuk, we learn that you can be machal on Shabbos, assuming you're going to get there in time for the end of Shabbos, before the end of Shabbos. Not just you can have people accompanying you. And not only that, you can take your sandwiches with as well, or whatever food you need until the end of Shabbos, in time to be able to get there so that they can actually announce Mekudesh on the right day on Shabbos. And with that, gentlemen, I'm pleased to say Hadron Aloch Arbor Rosh Hashanim, which means either the word Hadron Aloch means it's beautiful, Hodor, or Lahader is to go back, which means, that's why some people would say Hadron Aloch Arbor Rosh Hashanim Bili Neder. We hope to come back to you sometime, first parak of Rosh Hashanah. It was a tough one, but we're not forgetting you, first parak of Rosh Hashanah. We hope to come back to you. So, Hadron Aloch Abor Rosh Hashanah Bili Neder, the parak of Abor Rosh Hashanah. We hope to come back to you. A great accomplishment there. Daf Chof Beis. And with that, I've got a glass of wine handy. You might want to have whatever you like. And with that, gentlemen, I don't know who else we've got on here. Hope, Malcolm, you got a glass handy? No glass?
Symbolic.
And all I say is, L'chaim, well done, everybody. It was not an easy parak, and so well done. Bottle or whatever.
Amen.
L'chaim, everybody.
Chaim.
Great. Well done, everybody. So I say shkach to everybody and all the technicalities behind this, the technical men, technical bots. Mervyn, I'm sure you're having a good drink down there.
Yeah, I have opened a bottle of Tamdu, okay?
Oh, now we're talking.
Yeah.
Okay.
For special occasions.
I think the rule is you're meant to, if you're having it that, I think you have to have one for every member of the Shiurs here, don't you?
Don't worry, I shall do that. I'm very machmir about doing sort of.
I'm sure you are, but no testimony from you, please, after that. Okay.
Thank you very much.
L'chaim once again.
L'chaim.
Can I ask you, Peter, to let the shul know? They may want to put in that we're just starting a new perek and Mitzvah Hashem next week. We're always pleased to see new faces anytime, but it might be a time if people want to join another good time as we start the next perek next week. So yes, shkach.
Okay.
And be well, everybody. L'chaim.
Thank you, Norman. Brilliant.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Be well. Good to see you, Michael, as well.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.